Let me ask you something uncomfortable. How much of your mental energy today, right now, is being spent on something you cannot actually change? Maybe it's a situation at work that's completely out of your hands. Maybe it's what someone said about you behind your back. Maybe it's the economy, the news, the weather, or whether someone texts you back. Here's the brutal truth. If you can't control it, worrying about it isn't just useless. It is, by every rational definition, insane. That's not an insult. That's a diagnosis. And the ancient Stoics figured this out over 2,000 years ago. They called it the dichotomy of control. And once you truly understand it, I mean really understand it, not just nod along, your relationship with stress, anxiety, and suffering will change permanently. So stay with me, because in the next 20 minutes, we are going to do something most people never do in their entire lives. We are going to draw a clear, unambiguous line between what is yours to change and what is yours to release. Welcome. This might be the most important philosophy lesson you ever watch. Here's something nobody tells you about the human mind. It was never designed for peace. It was designed for survival. For most of human history, anxiety was useful. It kept us alert. It stopped us from getting eaten by predators. But here's the problem. The brain that evolved to scan for lions on the savannah is now scanning your email inbox at 2 a.m. The threats have changed. Your biology hasn't. This is why modern humans, despite living in the safest, most comfortable period in all of human history, report some of the highest levels of anxiety and chronic stress ever recorded. We have eliminated most of the actual dangers our ancestors faced, and yet we are more mentally exhausted than ever. The Stoics lived in a different world, one full of wars, plagues, political chaos, and uncertainty, and yet many of them found a deep, unshakable calm. Not because life was easier, not because they had better circumstances, but because they had a better operating system for their minds. And today, that operating system starts with one foundational idea: the separation of what is up to us from what is not. Before we go deeper, let's take 60 seconds to understand who these people actually were. Because Stoicism is not just dusty ancient philosophy. It's a battle-tested psychological framework used by some of the greatest minds in history. Stoicism was founded around 300 BC by a man named Zeno of Citium in Athens, but it was perfected by three extraordinary figures. First, Epictetus, a man born into slavery who had no money, no status, no freedom, and yet became one of the most psychologically free human beings who ever lived. Second, Seneca, one of Rome's most powerful political advisors, who navigated power, exile, and eventually his own death with complete composure. And third, Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world at the time, the Emperor of Rome, who still chose to write private journal entries, reminding himself not to get arrogant, not to lose perspective, and not to waste mental energy on things outside his control. Three completely different men, three completely different circumstances, all arriving at the same conclusion. Most of what we suffer from, we create ourselves by caring too much about the wrong things. So what exactly is the dichotomy of control? The word dichotomy simply means a division into two parts, and the Stoic version divides all of reality into exactly two categories. Category 1, things that are up to us. Category 2, things that are not up to us. That's it. The entire philosophy begins with this single cut. Epictetus opens his famous handbook, the Enchiridion, with these exact words: some things are in our control and others not. He didn't bury the lead. He didn't warm you up with inspirational fluff. He opened with the fundamental truth. In our control, according to Epictetus, are our opinions, our impulses, our desires, and our actions. essentially our inner world. Everything else, our body, our reputation, our property, what other people say or do or think, these are not fully in our control. Notice what he's not saying. He's not saying none of these things matter. He's not saying you should be passive or indifferent to the world. He's saying that when you treat things outside your control as if they were within your control, you make yourself a slave to circumstance. And that is where all unnecessary suffering is born. Of all the Stoics, Epictetus has the most powerful story because he didn't just philosophize about freedom, he had to live it under the worst possible conditions. Epictetus was born a slave, possibly in what is now Turkey, around 50 AD. He had no rights. His body was legally the property of another human being. At some point, his master deliberately broke his leg, and Epictetus, according to historical accounts, simply warned him it would break. And when it did, he said calmly, "Did I not tell you?" Not from coldness, not from indifference, but from a profound understanding that his master could control his leg, but could never touch what mattered most: his mind, his judgments, his character. Think about that for a moment. A man in chains with a deliberately broken leg who understood more about freedom than most people living in comfort and liberty today. He was eventually freed, went on to teach philosophy, and attracted some of the most powerful students in Rome. His lesson was simple. No one can take your inner freedom unless you hand it over yourself. And most of us, voluntarily, daily, hand it over to traffic, to social media comments, to other people's opinions. We enslave ourselves willingly. Epictetus never did. Let's get specific, because one of the most common mistakes people make when they first encounter Stoicism is to think it's asking them to give up ambition or stop caring. It's not. So let's build the real list of what is genuinely within your control. Your thoughts, specifically the ones you choose to engage with and the ones you choose to dismiss. Your interpretations, the meaning you assign to events. Your values, what you decide matters and what doesn't. Your effort, how hard you try, how much care you bring to a task. Your responses, how you reply to what happens to you. Your habits, the daily patterns you build over time. Your words, what you say and how you say it. And most fundamentally, your choices, the direction you point your life in. These are yours, completely, absolutely, undeniably yours. No one can take them. No force of circumstance can remove them. Even in the worst situations, illness, loss, failure, rejection, these remain in your court. And here's the insight that changes everything. These are also the only things that determine the actual quality of your life. Not outcomes, not results, not what happens to you, but what you bring to what happens to you. Now, let's build the other list, because this is where most people's stress actually lives. What is not in your control? Other people's opinions of you. Whether someone likes you, respects you, or thinks well of you, entirely outside your hands. Other people's behavior. You cannot make anyone do anything. You can influence, you can request, you can inspire, but you cannot control. The past. Every single thing that has already happened is permanently outside your control. The future. You can plan, prepare, and pursue, but the actual outcome is never guaranteed. Your reputation. What people say about you behind your back, how you're perceived, how history remembers you, not in your hands. The economy, the weather, whether your flight gets delayed, whether the project succeeds after you've done your best, whether you get the job after the best interview of your life. Here is the key insight. The list of what is not in your control is infinite. The list of what is in your control is small, specific, and internal. The Stoics say, spend your energy only on the finite list. Every drop of energy you pour into the infinite list is energy stolen from the only things that can actually change your life. Let's talk about where stress actually comes from, because most people get this completely wrong. We say things like, that person stressed me out, or this situation is so stressful, as if stress is something that happens to us from the outside. But stress is not an external event. Stress is an internal response to a perceived gap between what is happening and what you think should be happening. Notice the word perceived and think should be. Both of those live inside you, not outside. Epictetus put it this way: men are disturbed not by things, but by the opinions about things. This is now supported by modern psychology, particularly in cognitive behavioral therapy, which was literally built on this Stoic foundation. What stresses you out is never the event itself. It is your judgment of the event, combined with a demand that reality be different from what it is. Two people can lose the same job. One is devastated for months. The other sees it as an opportunity and is employed somewhere better within weeks. Same external event, completely different internal responses. The event didn't determine the outcome. The interpretation did. And interpretation is always, always within your control.
Let me make this completely real for you with a scenario most people can relate to. Imagine you have a job interview tomorrow for a role you really want. The Stoic approach asks you to draw a line right down the middle of this situation. On the left side, what is in your control? Your preparation tonight, how much you research the company, how well you sleep, what you wear, how early you leave, your attitude, energy, and presence in the room, the quality of your answers, how honestly you present yourself, how you handle a difficult question. These are all yours, fully, completely yours. On the right side, what is not in your control? Whether the interviewer likes you personally, whether they'd already decided on an internal candidate, whether they're having a bad day, what other candidates look like on paper, whether the company's budget changes overnight, the actual hiring decision. The Stoic says pour everything you have into the left column. Give it your absolute best. Then release the right column completely. Not because you don't care about the outcome, you do, but because agonizing over the right column robs you of the energy and clarity you need to excel at the left column. The only way to maximize your chances is to stop worrying about the result and start controlling the inputs. Every single time.
Now let's meet the most powerful Stoic in history. Marcus Aurelius was Roman emperor from 161 to 180 AD. He commanded the largest military force in the world. He managed one of history's most complex political systems. He faced the Antonine Plague, a pandemic that killed up to 10 million people. He fought wars on multiple fronts simultaneously. And throughout all of it, he kept a private journal, never meant to be published, in which he constantly reminded himself of Stoic principles. We know that journal today as Meditations, and it is one of the most remarkable documents ever written. In it, Marcus writes to himself, not to impress anyone, not for public consumption. Things like, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. And the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Here was a man who literally had the power of life and death over millions, and yet he spent his private moments reminding himself not to be arrogant, not to waste energy on opinions he couldn't control, not to be dragged into panic by things outside his power. If the most powerful man in the world needed this reminder daily, what does that say about the rest of us?
Here's where neuroscience meets ancient philosophy. Your brain has a built-in negativity bias. This means your brain, by default, pays more attention to threats, losses, and problems than to opportunities, gains, and solutions. This isn't a character flaw. This is evolution. Our ancestors who worried more survived more. The ones who were too relaxed got eaten. So natural selection favored the worriers. But here's the modern problem. Your brain cannot distinguish between a real threat and an imaginary one. When you lie awake at 3 a.m. catastrophizing about a conversation that might go badly next Tuesday, your brain releases cortisol, the same stress hormone it releases when you are in actual physical danger. Your nervous system does not know the difference between a lion and a thought about a lion. This is why the Stoic practice of distinguishing what is real from what is merely imagined and what is within your control versus outside it is not just philosophical self-help. It is a neurological intervention. Every time you catch yourself spiraling about something outside your control and redirect your attention to what you can actually do right now, you are literally rewiring your brain. You are overriding millions of years of anxious programming with reason, choice, and clarity. We are living through an anxiety epidemic. According to the World Health Organization, anxiety disorders now affect over 284 million people globally. In the UK and US, rates of anxiety, depression, and stress-related illness have risen dramatically over the last 2 decades. And yet, here is what's fascinating. By almost every objective measure, people in these countries are safer, healthier, wealthier, and more comfortable than at any point in human history. So what's going on? The Stoic answer would be, we have an unprecedented amount of external stimulation and almost no training in internal navigation. We are being flooded with things we cannot control. News cycles, social media outrage, global crises, other people's highlight reels. And we have never been taught the most important cognitive skill of all, the ability to identify what is yours to change and what is yours to release. The result is a generation of people who are technically free, but mentally imprisoned, who have every material advantage and yet struggle to find peace for a single uninterrupted hour. Stoicism doesn't ask you to ignore the world. It asks you to stop giving the world a key to your mind that it has no right to hold.
I want to give you a practical tool you can use today. I call it the Sphere of Control exercise, and it takes about 5 minutes. Here's how it works. Get a piece of paper, or open your Notes app, and write down whatever is currently stressing you most. Be specific. Don't just write work stress. Write the actual thing. Maybe it's a difficult colleague. Maybe it's a financial worry. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's a relationship. Whatever it is, write it down. Now draw a line down the middle of the page. On the left, write every aspect of this situation that you can directly influence or change. On the right, write every aspect you cannot control, no matter what you do. Most people discover something immediately uncomfortable. The right column is much longer than the left. And they also discover something immediately liberating. The left column, however short, is enough. It is enough because it is real, because it is actionable. Because when you focus your energy on those things exclusively, you become genuinely more effective at changing your situation. The right column, cross it out. Not forever, not with indifference, but with the recognition that pouring energy into it is like pouring water into sand. Do this exercise for every major stressor in your life, and within a week, your relationship with anxiety will be transformed. Let's talk about something nobody wants to hear. Your relationship with your phone is almost certainly making you less calm, less focused, and less in control, not more. Here's why. Every time you scroll through social media, you are immersing yourself in an
infinite stream of events, opinions, crises, and drama that are almost entirely outside your control. A war on the other side of the world, a political scandal, a celebrity's breakdown, a culture war argument with 3,000 comments. Your nervous system registers all of this as relevant, as threatening, as things you should care about and respond to. But you cannot control any of it. And yet, you keep scrolling. Why? Because your brain is addicted to the hit of feeling informed, feeling outraged, feeling like you're participating in something important. But information about things you cannot change is not power. It is noise. The Stoics didn't have social media, but they did have the Roman Forum, a place full of gossip, rumor, political drama, and public spectacle. And the advice of Marcus Aurelius was clear. Limit your exposure to it. Not because the world doesn't matter, but because your mental bandwidth is finite. Protect it like your life depends on it, because in many ways, it does.
Relationships are where the dichotomy of control gets hardest and most important, because the people we love are, by definition, outside our control, and that terrifies us. When you're in a romantic relationship, you cannot control whether your partner stays. You cannot control whether they change, grow, or remain who they were when you fell for them. When you're a parent, you cannot control whether your child makes good choices or stays safe. When you're a friend, you cannot control whether they value the friendship as much as you do. This is the deep existential discomfort that most people spend their entire lives trying to escape, by controlling, by clinging, by monitoring, by demanding. And every attempt to control another person ultimately destroys what you were trying to protect. Genuine love, the Stoics suggest, requires the courage to care deeply while holding loosely. You can be fully present. You can communicate openly. You can set clear values. You can lead by example. But you cannot own another person's free will. The moment you try, you stop being a partner and start being a warden. What is in your control in every relationship is how you show up, with integrity, with attention, with honesty, and with respect. That is your contribution. It is not a guarantee, but it is everything. Here's something Marcus Aurelius actually did every single morning, and something modern research shows is remarkably effective for mental clarity and emotional regulation. Before the demands of the day began, Marcus would sit with his journal and engage in what we now call premeditation, a deliberate mental rehearsal of potential challenges ahead. He would ask himself, what difficulties might I encounter today? What frustrations might arise? What could go wrong? Not to catastrophize, but to pre-decide his response. He would remind himself that certain things were going to be outside his control, and he would affirm in advance that he would respond with reason and composure regardless. You can do the same. Every morning, before you check your phone, before the news, before the demands begin, take 5 minutes. Write down one thing you're anxious about today. Then apply the line, what about this is in my power? Commit to bringing your full effort to that. Then write, what about this is outside my power? And deliberately choose to release it. Do not suppress it. Do not pretend it doesn't matter. Simply acknowledge it and choose not to rent it space in your mind. This practice, done consistently, is one of the most powerful mental health habits available to any human being, and it was developed 2,000 years ago.
The Stoic philosophy doesn't just ask you to accept things outside your control. It goes one radical step further. It asks you to love them. This is the concept of Amor Fati, Latin for love of fate. Not tolerance, not grudging acceptance, love. The philosopher Nietzsche, deeply influenced by the Stoics, described this as the highest human ideal, to not merely bear what is necessary,
but to love it. Marcus Aurelius echoed this. A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it. The obstacle doesn't just stop you, it becomes you. It strengthens you. It reveals you. Think of every great person you've ever admired. Their greatness was not formed in comfort. It was formed in difficulty, in loss, in failure, in precisely the moments where what happened was completely outside their control. The question they answered, the one Stoicism trains you to answer, is, given that this is happening and I cannot change it, what is the best possible version of myself that can emerge from it? That question transforms victims into protagonists. It doesn't deny pain. It uses pain. It doesn't pretend the fire isn't hot. It recognizes that the fire is what makes the steel.
Let me be clear about something. Stoicism is not about pretending bad things don't hurt. It is not about being emotionally numb or robotically detached. The Stoics were fully human. They loved their children. They grieved losses. They felt fear and pain. What they refused to do was let those feelings become the permanent weather of their lives. When Epictetus lost everything, freedom, status, physical integrity, he did not stop feeling. He stopped letting his feelings dictate his choices. There is a distinction the Stoics made between what modern psychologists now call the first arrow and the second arrow. The first arrow is what happens to you. A relationship ends. You lose a job. Someone you love dies. That arrow hurts. That is unavoidable. But the second arrow, the one we fire at ourselves, is the suffering we add on top. The self-blame, the obsessive replaying of events, the rage at what we cannot change, the weeks and months of why me and what if and if only. The Stoics say the first arrow is inevitable. The second arrow is always a choice. When something bad happens, feel it, acknowledge it, grieve it if necessary. But do not pick up the second arrow. Do not compound an external wound with an internal one that you inflict on yourself. Your response to the unavoidable is the one thing that always remains yours.
Here's the honest truth about Stoicism. Understanding it intellectually takes about an hour. Living it is the work of a lifetime. Because the brain is a habit machine, and most of us have spent years, sometimes decades, building the habit of worry, of control, of catastrophizing. You don't undo that with one video, however good it is. But you can start right now. Here's a simple daily practice to begin building the habit of letting go. It has 3 steps. Step 1, the noticing. Throughout your day, whenever you feel tension or anxiety arise, pause and ask, is this within my control or not? Just the question is enough to interrupt the automatic spiral. Step 2, the redirect. If it's within your control, act. Stop thinking, start doing. If it's outside your control, consciously, deliberately say to yourself, this is not mine to carry. Not as a surrender, as a release. Step 3, the replacement. Don't leave a void. Replace the anxious thought with a specific, concrete action that is within your control, no matter how small, even if it's just breathing deliberately for 30 seconds. Over time, days, weeks, months, this 3-step process becomes automatic. Your brain learns a new default. When something happens, instead of immediately spiraling into what you can't control, it asks first, what can I actually do here?
I want to leave you with a challenge. 7 days. That's all I'm asking. For the next 7 days, do one thing every morning before you touch your phone. Take out a piece of paper and write down your current biggest worry. Then, draw the line. Left side, what you can control. Right side, what you cannot. Commit fully to the left side. Release the right side. Do this every single morning for 7 days. By day 3, you will start to notice something strange. The right column, the things you can't control, will start to feel lighter. Not because they've changed, but because you've changed your relationship to them. By day 7, you may have the experience that Epictetus described. The experience of genuine, unshakable inner freedom. Not the freedom to control everything, the far more powerful freedom of not needing to. Let me close with this. The world will always be beyond your control. That is not a bug. That is the feature. The chaos, the uncertainty, the unpredictability of life, these are not obstacles to your happiness. They are the context in which you get to discover what you are actually made of. The Stoics didn't promise a world without storms. They promised you that you could become someone who wasn't threatened by them. That is the dichotomy of control. And that is yours, starting right now. Thank you for watching. If this video changed the way you see your stress today, share it with someone who needs it. And for more Stoic philosophy that actually changes how you live, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.